Welcome to this episode of RED-C Roundup. I'm the host this week, Caleb Brawner, and we are welcoming Dr. Ray Guarendi, clinical psychologist, father of 10, author, the host of The Doctor's In. Dr. Ray has spent decades helping families raise strong, faith-filled kids in a culture that often pushes the opposite. We'll be talking with him about his book, Raising Upright Kids in an Upside-Down World, a practical, down-to-earth guide for parents who want to protect their child's innocence, instill gratitude and responsibility, and stand firm against the pressures of today's world. And of course, you can always catch Dr. Ray at noon right here on RED-C Catholic Radio. Dr. Ray, how are you?
Well, Caleb, I don't appreciate the fact that you said decades. It makes me sound old. Could you say like many months of experience?
Many moons of experience, multiplicity of moons.
Well, you didn't say a geological era. I do appreciate that.
Yeah. No, I thought it best to skip that. So I wanted to just jump right into raising upright kids in an upside down world, because I thought that through reading it, I'm got a few pages left, but I thought that it was so straightforward, no nonsense, with a lot of very practical advice. And one of my favorite things about it was all of the kind of the dialogue that you might hear from other people and your own children in response to some of the parenting advice you have. So I just want to kind of get to the heart of the book. Like, what was your ultimate goal of this book for parents?
In all of human history, Caleb, the main influencers of how a child was raised was the family, the clan, the tribe. That's pretty much the way it was. There wasn't any influence going to come into your circle to shape who your kid is and to misshape his soul. That is by far no longer the case. We have created the last 40, 50, 60 years a society that, like the movie The Fog, can creep under the tightest crevices in your home and get in there and shape who your kid is, how they think, how they look at life, how they look at morals, how they look at God, how they look at their family. I'll be sitting in my office with a parent who has, say, a 17-year-old, and they'll say, I don't know who that is. We didn't raise him that way. Most of the time I can say, I believe you, but you underestimated what did raise him that way. The reality is, this is not a farm in 1880 anymore. And the influences on your kid are so good. They're so entertaining. They're so seductive. They're algorithms that are shaping who he is in a much, much more entertaining, seductive way than the average parent is. And the weapons the parent have, of course, is the love, the discipline, and this is the big one, to keep these influences at bay for as long as they can while the child matures and absorbs what the parent is trying to teach him.
Yeah, and we have chosen to homeschool in order to help do that, especially with my background in teaching. You just see all these outside influences just really warping these kids and really taking up all of their attention and their energy. And so how can you make sure that your family is that the big influencer of your children instead of these outside influences?
My parents did not have to be anywhere near as vigilant about where I was, what I was watching, who I was with, as I did as a father, and as you will even more so. All right, my kids are raised now, Caleb. They're in their 20s and 30s. You got little ones. So what is happening is that the shapers of your kids' souls are everywhere. And the Catholic parent, if they were to go with the flow of the culture, their child would become worldly long before they want their child to become worldly. I'll share with you a small example. We homeschooled too. And I used to say, homeschooling is one option, how it works for you, how it suits for you. But now I say, I think if your prime goal is to raise a child that is innocent for as long as childhood allows, then you already seriously consider thinking about homeschooling. Now, when we did it, you had to do it by yourself. Now there are co-ops all over the place. There's all kinds of support groups. It is so much easier. So that is the first thing. You delay. Now there are two huge arguments that are thrown at parents who want to keep their kids' innocence longer than the culture says so. One, well, you can't protect them forever. There's a real world out there. They're going to be exposed to it. First of all, you're not trying to protect them forever. You're trying to expose them to the world at your pace, not the pop culture's pace. That's one. Secondly, how are they going to be socialized? They have to learn to get along with a whole range of people with all kinds of attitudes and personalities. Again, as Bill Bennett said, socialized to what? If you want a bunch of 18 third graders to shape how your kid thinks, that's not socialization. That is just sheep.
It's not normal
No,
either.
it's not normal. It is not normal.
In the human history, the times that your third grader was around 30 other third graders is zero.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, for most of human history, the whole idea of socialization to a group norm was not something that people thought about. Socialization was done by the parents, by the people around the child. That's how the child was socialized. I used to say that when people would throw that argument at us. I said, so wait a minute. How do you define socialization? If it is the inculcation of morals and virtue and hopefully God seeking, that's my job. The parent does that, not another 9-year-old. So the parent socializes the child. But even if, let's say, of course, the majority of people can't homeschool, at that, the average parent, even the parents you're talking to right now, underestimates how vigilant they have to be. For example, sleepovers. I can't tell you how many parents will say to me, well, I called the mom. She's a relative of mine, and I know what they're like. I could not believe the movie they showed to my 8-year-old daughter. Or I cannot believe how many smartphones were there, and these kids were all over the smartphones. I say, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
You're right. If you're going to do a sleepover, you better know that parent like you know yourself. And most of the time, that's not possible. Just something as little as a sleepover. Example. Caleb, do you know the average age right now of a kid getting a smartphone?
Well, I read your book, so it's about 11 or so.
It's even younger now. Is it? It's between 9 and 10. Now, if your little 10-year-old doesn't have a smartphone, first of all, he's in the minority. But let's say you go to 13 and you decide, no, 9, 10, that's crazy. But this child's been badgering you, and she's in the 8th grade, and every single one of her classmates has a smartphone. She's the only one. And she feels like a weirdo. She feels like an oddball. And you're thinking to yourself, oh boy, what am I doing? I'm cutting her off socially from her friends. She's going to feel isolated. She's going to be quasi-Amish. Now what? So you hold out till 13. She would be probably in the bottom 5% of kids who wouldn't have a smartphone at 13. Ridiculously stupid to do that. And this is not some shrink's opinion who has a Catholic worldview. The research is pouring in that this stuff is not good for our kids. They can't be expected to handle it. But here's the difference. When I wrote my first book, I wrote it because I saw that a lot of parents were very skittish, nervous, second-guessing, because they were worried about doing something psychologically incorrect in raising their children. The experts have all kinds of theories and notions. They can't agree, and first of all, most of them don't have a Christian worldview. But the parents were thinking, well, come on, that guy's got letters after his name. Who am I? I'm just a mom, I better do what he says if I want to have well-adjusted kids. So I wrote the book saying, look, you've got to decide your own morals and values, your own instincts, your own common sense in your own home. What has happened since then, Caleb, is something even more frightening. Parents are parenting in fear. If I don't give her a smartphone, say at age 14, what's her reaction going to be like? Is she going to hate me? Is she going to be deceptive? Is she going to feel depressed? Is she going to feel isolated from her friends? What kind of devastation in her little psyche am I going to bring about if I don't go with the flow of the culture? I'm already out of step because she's the only one in her class who doesn't have one. Now what? And I tell parents, you cannot parent in fear. You have to parent according to your best judgment and recognize there could be fallout. But caving to the culture is a worse risk.
Absolutely. And I will add to what you said about like the smartphones at the sleepovers and stuff like that. You might be sending your kid to high school and you're like, well, here is their technology policy. So actually, like, the kids aren't allowed to have the smartphone in class and things like that. Let me tell you, those technology policies aren't always followed. And if a handful of teachers don't enforce them, then probably most of the teachers are going to end up not enforcing them, even if the school has a strict technology policy, because it's too hard. And you're not the parent, and it's become so difficult to say no in the classroom. And I wanted to go talk to you about the chapter 2 of the book, where you talk about the power of no, where you say, love is not proven by how often you say yes, but by how wisely you say no. And so why do kids actually need parents to say no more often?
Because the world says yes to things that are very harmful to their soul. If you're not a Christian parent whose main goal is to raise a child who seeks God, then the world, it may not settle upon you comfortably, but it isn't the threat to the child's virtuous soul as it would be if you weren't religious. Okay, but if the people listening to this program, by and large, are more religious than the culture. They're more religious than people who say they're religious but wouldn't listen to Catholic radio or barely go to church. Okay, so that makes you different. You're very different now. Your goals as a parent are very, very different. To the degree that you are not in sync with the culture, your kid is going to see this. He's going to look around and say, how can all those people be wrong, Mom, and you be right? And as a parent, you have to have the strength to say, well, they are, and I am. I saw a survey, Caleb. It was a few years back. Over 50% of parents have absolutely no safeguards on the computer or the smartphone. Nothing. You can do it. You can put safeguards on there. There's all kinds of ways to do this. You can pair. My brother had that situation with his son who's going to public school, and they had a Chromebook. Mm-hmm. They paired that Chromebook with their phone. So anything that came in and out of that Chromebook came up on their phone. You can do this. This is not all that hard to do, but it's amazing how many parents don't. Another example. What do you think is the number one justification that parents will use, and kids will use too, for getting a phone.
What if I need to call you? What if I need to contact you to be picked up or whatever?
There you go. Safetyness, factor, change in plans. And parents generally buy into that one. Here's the difference. Try this little experiment. Say to little 14-year-old Telly, you know, honey, you're right. You're right. You do need to get a hold of me. Here's a flip phone. Watch what happens. Ooh, ooh, ooh. What? How does that work? I'm not pulling that out in front of my friends. Oh, that is lame. I'm not going to have that. See, it's not safety. It's a justification for the latest and greatest is what they want.
Right. Mm-hmm.
That's the difference. One father did this. He was great. His son was, I don't know, 9th grade, something like that. He said, well, what if practice is late? What if I have to take a shower and I don't get out there? His dad goes, well, you've been telling me for years that all of your friends have smartphones. So you got hundreds to borrow from.
Right. Yeah, no, it's true. And they make phones now that have calling and texting and even like maps, but don't have just broad access to the internet too.
That's right. A lot of safe phones out there. There's Wise phone. I think there's Gab phone, something like that. Those phones are like.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so a big kind of a common refrain in the book is about smartphones and the dangers of smartphones. So I know growing up, I just missed like the smartphone in high school. I didn't get one until I was in college. But I know they're everywhere now. Are parents, in your experience, wisening up to the dangers of smartphones, or is it just getting worse every year?
The research is pouring in now, Caleb. It is coming in from every direction. The internet, unlimited access to the internet for the most absolutely vile stuff you can come across. That kid who killed Charlie Kirk. I mean, he admits he was shaped by these most vile places on the internet. Okay, that's very common. The other thing is social media. Social media basically wants to shape your kid. If your kid is gender confused a little bit, feeling like, geez, I'm 14 years old and I really don't know who I am. So they search something. Well, lo and behold, the algorithm kicks in and starts feeding them the same thing. And most parents are unaware of this. They don't know this. Most parents can't keep up with technology. Heck, I can't keep up with technology. I wore my garage door opener for 2 years so people would think I had a pager, you know? So what happens is that we can't keep up with the galloping ahead of technology. The kids, that's their language. That's what they do. And we're generally unaware of. For example, I will tell parents, we thought, they'll tell me this, we thought we had perfect security on our computer, and our kid figured out a way to get around it.
Oh, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Put a password on the computer.
When I was teaching at that school for boys that had committed sexual offenses, a kid found a way to access inappropriate material through Google Docs. And so we had to ban Google Docs from the Chromebooks. And so it's just, there are ways around the restrictions and the guides more than you can imagine. And it just takes a kid that wants to find stuff a while and they'll figure out ways around. So even with the protections, you still have to be careful. And one of the things that you talk about is the placement of a family computer, the placement of TVs and stuff. So can you talk some about that? Because I think that's just such a practical thing we can do in our homes.
Privacy is not your friend. That computer should be in the living space of the family, not in a bedroom, not downstairs. That smartphone when your 16-year-old has one, never, ever, ever, ever goes up to her bedroom at night when she goes to bed. Never. It is immediately off limits after 8 o'clock. So just set little thing. No smartphones at the dinner table. No smartphones when we go out to eat. No smartphones at grandma's birthday party. Anything that is a social interaction, she is not allowed to hide behind her smartphone. But see, parents don't do that. And I ask them, Caleb, I say, why not? And the number one answer, we just don't want to fight.
Yeah.
I've often said this.
Yeah.
If my kids go astray, I want to at least be able to say they had to go through me. I don't want to say I stepped aside.
Yeah. I hate the two phrases, you have to pick your battles, and are you willing to die on that hill? And it's like, I'll die on any hill.
Those are disgusting phrases. I don't know if I dealt with it. Did I deal with it in that book, Caleb? Because I know I did.
A little bit.
I dealt with it heavily in a couple of the other books. Pick your battles is basically the experts saying, well, you have to decide really what is an offense and what is a minor offense. Say, for example, obviously you don't want your children to cuss at you. Okay, so that's a battle. But, rolling their eyes at you, that's not anything. That's just rolling their eyes. And I say, no, that's disdain. Roll your eyes at another adult once and see how long you stay friends with them. That's disdain. So the experts basically, when they say pick their battles, they're not saying discipline what is needed in responsibility or virtue. They're saying, well, you got to overlook a lot of misbehavior. Just overlook it. Are you familiar with the broken window police theory?
I am.
Basically, that says that a lot of policing was done in some of the bigger cities, which is, well, we don't have time to go after graffiti. We don't have time to go after broken windows and abandoned buildings. We don't have time to go after couches set on fire on a curb. We got bigger stuff to deal with. And what they found was, when all of that little stuff was let go, it created a mindset. It created a perception that nobody's in charge. The big people aren't in charge around here. And that's what I tell parents. If your daughter can roll her eyes at you or go, yeah, mom, right, whatever, that is disrespect. And if you deal with that little stuff, the big stuff doesn't happen. Because she's not even allowed to say, yeah, mom, right, whatever, much less cuss at you. So yeah, that is a piece of nonsense from the experts up one side and down the other that just has, I believe, paralyzed parents for a lot of good intervention.
Yeah, in chapter 4, you say authority is not a democracy, it's a responsibility. And it calls to my mind, like, one of the things that has kind of opened my eyes about what parenting is that our children are not, what's the right way to phrase this? Our children are not ours. We are their stewards, and that stewardship has been given to us by God. And that's an awesome responsibility to steward those children into upright adults and to steward them towards God and not towards the world and society's morality. So, how do you go about establishing that right authority, and how do you show that discipline, as you say, discipline is love in action to your children?
One of the things that I emphasize for dads in particular, because it doesn't come as natural to dads as it does to moms. If you're going to have high standards and your kid sees that, in fact, your standards are higher than the surrounding culture, you expect more, you hold them to a more virtuous conduct, then you better really be affectionate. Hugs, kisses, love yous, heavy, heavy affection. I am now convinced, after as you so rudely said, Caleb, decades of experience, that the power of affection in creating the mind of a kid that says, well, I don't like what my parents are doing in terms of standards, in terms of discipline, in terms of expectation, but I sure can't deny how much they love me. That's huge. That is just huge. One of the little anecdotes I use, I don't know if I talked about this in the book. My son played basketball in high school. Before the games, I'd sit about 4 seats back in the bleachers, and I'd wait. I'd wait pregame. They're horsing around down there, the guys, and I'd wait for the opportune time. Then I would go down. I'd grab my son Petey. I'd hug him. I'd kiss him on the neck. And then I had to be very supportive, Caleb. You know, when you're a psychologist, you have to be very affirming. I would say, Petey, try not to stink the joint out. And he'd laugh. And you could see the gasps on the other parents in the bleachers. I'm breaking all the adolescent rules. You don't hug your kid in public. Your kid doesn't want you to even look at him in public. Okay? So there comes a phone. You hear that?
Yeah.
There
Is
you go.
that?
My wife took care of it.
Oh, okay.
Well, as they looked at me like this, I asked Petey, I said, Petey, does this bother you? He goes, would it make any difference, Dad? I said, no. I said, there is no way that you're going to tell me that I can't hug and kiss you wherever, however much that I want. And that's the way it is. And he told me later, a couple of his teammates came up to him and said, I wish my dad would do that. So that's what I tell fathers. I said, you got to, you're going to have high standards. You better really be affectionate, because the one thing you want to convey is, this is because I love you. This is not because I'm a dictator and because it's my way or the highway, punk. Now, they may think that anyway. There may be no way around it. But what you're doing is you're playing for the future. So when they're 23, they can look back and go, I got it now. I see why my parents did what they did. That was awful smart. Now I appreciate it. When I was 15, I didn't.
One of the things we do at my house is we really try and emphasize what everyone's role is in the family. And so we are always asking our kids, you know, if they have something they want to do that we say no to or whatever it is. We're like, all right, what is my job? And they're like, to take care of me and to help me. And I'm like, yeah. And you can't see that right now, that eating ice cream instead of dinner is bad for you. But I know that it's bad for you, and so you need to eat your dinner. And then maybe we can talk about ice cream after you eat your sausage or whatever it is. And so I find that is kind of like reinforcing what everyone's role is in the family. And I can already kind of foresee what that'll look like as they're older. All right, what's your job now? You're 15. You know, your job is to, you know, do your chores. Your job is to do good in school. Your job is to try your hardest in sports or whatever it is. Your job is to go to mass and pay attention and pray. And so that has been kind of something that my wife and I have fallen back on, is like really reinforcing and stating very clearly, like, the roles in the family. Your job as the older brother, your little brothers are looking up to you. Your job is to be a good example for them, right? That's your job as a big brother. And that seems to be kind of helpful to have that kind of, that shared language and vocabulary of like roles.
Caleb, do you have a daughter or two?
3 boys.
Oh, 3 boys. So you have no girls, because if you had a girl, her job would be to be the boss. That's kind of the way it is. Hits about age 3, stays the same. I had 5 estrogen Americans in my family, and they were in charge. What you say is absolutely so true. But here's I think what you have, and it comes naturally to you, and it comes naturally to loving parents. Your house is filled with love. In so many ways, every day you show those kids how much they mean to you. You don't have to gushy every 2 minutes, but they see that you kiss them before they go to bed, and you sit around the dinner table and you ask them and you listen to them when they talk and they ramble on and they make no sense, but you patiently listen. They tell little kid jokes and you laugh. The last thing you want to do is laugh at a little kid joke, but you laugh. And they see in countless ways how much they can rely on mom and dad, how much mom and dad love them. And that is why you cannot be afraid to go against the flow of the culture, because the overall message of your home is we love you desperately. And that's your motive for what you do. That's your motive for when they look around and think, how come I can't have that? How come we're not allowed to do that? How come we only have half hour of TV a night? How come? And the more they get exposed to peers, the more they're going to make that comparison. 100 years ago, more people thought like you. They look around and there were more and more parents who did the exact same thing you did. Not anymore. It's just not the way it is. And you cannot parent without strength of resolve. You just can't do it.
What are some, do you have any practical advice on kind of choosing like-minded parents to be around and helping kind of influence your child's peer group and helping influence their friends? Like, how do you go about, or what are some practical things you can do to kind of do that? Because, I'm blessed that my kids are growing up with a bunch of cousins and their parents are all pretty much on the exact same page that we are with all this stuff. And so they have a good peer group right now, but I know as my oldest is 7, gets older, he's going to want to be around kids that aren't his cousins sometimes too. And so how do you go about influencing the pool of people that your child might want to be friends with?
When our Lord sent out the disciples, he sent them out in twos. Why did he do that, Caleb?
So that they would have someone with them to undergo all the trials. I mean,
yes, support.
Yeah, support, friendship,
one person,
solidarity.
One other person who thinks like you doubles and triples your strength.
Mm-hmm.
So I tell parents, and I say this a lot in the book, the answer to the question, can you pick their friends? I go, you may not be able to pick their friends particularly, but you can pick the pool from which they can pick. It is now critical to eliminate influences, kids who are much more worldly than your kid. Give you a small example. My son Andrew, when he was probably 8 or 9, there were 3 boys in the neighborhood who were being raised very loose. And they would want Andrew to come over to their place and play. No way, no how, not a chance, not going to happen. They lived across the street, still not going to happen. Now, the boys could come to our house. However, I always made sure that when they were at our house, one of us had an ear on what was going on out there. If there was any language used, the boys went home. If there was any kind of ugliness and meanness, viciousness, not just normal rough and tumble of boys, I'm talking about the nasty stuff. That game was over. And we had to do that. We had to select who our kids could hang with. You have to do it. There's research done that basically says the number one factor in straightening out an unruly, borderline antisocial adolescent is a change of a peer group. You change the peer group, and that just seems to osmotically make the kid behave better. So you're right. Yeah, you that is one of the factors. Peers is a big factor that you now have to screen, supervise, observe as a parent.
Yeah, I really like the saying, you are the mean average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. And whether that's statistically true or not, it rings true at the very least. And so it seems to me that one of the people we should be spending the most time with is Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament. So can you speak about, we've got about 6 minutes left. Can you speak a little bit about like the sacraments in family life and their role, and how can you lean on the sacraments to help, stem the tide of culture that's trying to overwhelm your family?
Survey done not so long ago that said if both parents take their kids to church, there is a decent chance. Now, at that time, they said it was a 70% chance. I don't think it's that high anymore, but probably 40 to 50% chance the kids will stay in church as adults. If only mom takes the kids to church, that drops down to 30%. If only dad takes the kids to church, it is the same as if mom and dad took the kids to church. Now, there's a lot of speculation on why that is, but that was the results of this. So, in fact, as Scott Hahn says, you soak them in the faith. Daily rosary together. That's why we had 10 kids, because we had each kid had 10, the decade of rosary. I was the one who usually lost my place. And my girls were quick to remind me, Dad, it's a Glory Be, not another Hail Mary. Oh, okay, thanks. My boys didn't even know we were there half the time. So you do this and you emphasize how important this stuff is. Now, one of the things I've noticed as kids get older, and this is when I've dealt with youth groups, people aren't answering their questions. We used to assume that if you just went to church, you got the sacraments, and you prayed relatively here and there throughout the day, the kids were going to absorb the faith. Well, that ain't happening. The stats are horrific. That is not happening. One of the big things the kids have to know, especially as they get older, is, why is this true? What does it matter? How can the church teach this when everybody else is teaching this? I don't get it. How can you expect a woman who's 16 years old to keep that child if she has no support? What's wrong with an abortion? So all of these things, when I talk to youth group kids, they've apparently never gotten answers to these.
Yeah.
It's just assumed they're going to soak it up somehow. And the culture is screaming at them that religion.
Yeah. And
go ahead, please.
You have to be the first and primary catechist of your child.
Pretty much.
And that's what our mission is at RED-C. RED-C stands for Religious Education for the Domestic Church. And while Catholic radio might not always be for kids, it is for you, and to learn the faith gives you the tools and the knowledge you need to pass that on to your children. And I love when Patrick Madrid has said many times, if you ever ask a question you don't know the answer to, you can say, I don't know the answer to that, but there is an answer, and we'll figure it out, and we'll talk about it. And go ahead.
It is so easy now. For all of its downsides, the internet makes it so easy to figure out why our church teaches what she does. If you go to Catholic.com, you just type in the question, what is the church's view on divorce and remarriage? And the answer comes up. A big, nice, thought out answer comes up. There are books all over the place. Robert Spitzer, Father Robert Spitzer, is one of my favorites for teaching the faith to young men and young women. The scientific, if you want to call them proofs, I think they are. I think they move to the level of almost proof of God,
right?
Of the truth of the Eucharist, of the shroud, of Fatima, of Guadalupe. I mean, he looks at the scientific evidence for these things and makes a pretty good case. And what he finds is that when you present this case to kids, it resonates with them because they're growing up in a culture that says science has pretty much disproved religion. That's the narrative of the culture. So there's all that stuff's available out there. One of my great regrets, Caleb, as a dad, when I used to go to bed and say my prayers, I would pray under the blanket. I'd lay in bed under the blanket. I'd say my prayers. The kids didn't know that Dad was saying his prayers. They just thought Dad's in bed. I had it to do over again. I'd say my prayers every night, kneeling by the bed, so they could see their dad saying his prayers by the bed every night.
Yeah, and that speaks to modeling the behavior you want to see, which is huge, 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 huge. I know that from, especially like from teaching, there were times where we'd do independent reading and instead of getting some grading done and things like that, I would sit in the front of the classroom and read a book because many of my students had never seen an adult read a book before. And, more than anything I did in the classroom, the things that improved their reading was that independent reading time where I just made sure they had a good book in their hand and got it done. And the same thing is for, there's parallels with the faith. You need to show your children how to practice the faith by practicing the faith. It's not something you can just talk about. You have to show them through your own actions. Dr. Ray, we're almost out of time, but there was one more thing that I wanted to ask you about. The book, Raising Upright Kids in an Upside Down World, is very funny. Not only is it full of practical advice, great examples, it's very funny. So I just wanted to, St. Thomas More is my patron saint, and he was known for his humor and his wit. Is that something that just comes natural to you? Why do you include humor in so much of what you do?
Because humor is real. Humor softens. A spoonful of sugar makes the medicine go down. And plus the other problem is we take ourselves too seriously, and this whole parenting thing has been fraught with nervousness and anxiety, all of that. And the humor more or less says, one, I'm in the same boat as you are. That's one. And two, you got to laugh more at this stuff. I'll give you a small example. My daughter, when she was talking, my kids are adopted, and she was talking to some adopted friends. And she wrote this letter to my wife that said, I don't have to listen to you. You're not my mom. Okay. And my wife got very upset, and she put that letter up on a cupboard. Well, my son, who was probably 17, 18 at the time, he came over and he saw the letter and he started laughing. And my wife said, Andrew, what are you doing? He goes, yeah, I remember thinking that. I just wasn't stupid enough to write it down. We both started laughing. It's like, yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, well, it makes me think of how, like, if we're just material beings, then our life is a tragedy in like the literary sense, in that we die at the end. But if we believe in the resurrection and that we are composite wholes, body and spirit, then our life is actually a comedy. There's a marriage at the end. There's a marriage feast at the end. And so to me, the humor is kind of an echo of that spiritual reality of our lives, that it is a comedy in the end. But anyway, that's about it. I wish we had longer. The book is Raising Upright Kids in an Upside Down World. And so, Dr. Ray, thank you so much for joining us on RED-C Roundup. And when considering the values of heaven and earth, always round up.